Hey team, today we're going to be taking a look at some unpopular engineering opinions. Legible handwriting is an underrated skill. Yeah, you know what? Engineers do have pretty bad handwriting. Doctors get a bad rap, but engineers, ooh, whole different level. I don't know if it's because they're usually drawing numbers, math equations and whatnot, rather than essays, but ooh, they're very out of practice. Actually, out of practice implies that if they were to write more, it would look better. But for some reason, I get the impression that no matter how much they wrote, it would still look like chicken scratch. The culture of bragging about how hard classes are is so yucky. Sometimes it feels like it's a competition of who can destroy their mental health faster. Yeah, this is a known thing that engineers have this superiority complex. It's funny because engineers look down on like business majors, but then even inside of engineering, there's like a tier list. Like civil is always the bottom, and then the top is always like, the computer people, like computer engineering, software engineering, electrical engineering. And then the middle of the pyramid, the distribution, is made up of the blue collar engineer, the mechanical engineers, those types of engineers. But yeah, no matter where you go in the world, it seems like you'll always run into some engineer bragging about being an engineer. And I made a whole video about that right here, talking about why that may be, so you can give that a watch if you want. Engineers can be good at art, and artists can be good at engineering. Who decided these things are opposites that can't mix? It's BS. Yeah, it does seem like engineers do have this looming stereotype of like, oh yeah, you just do number stuff, don't you? You don't know how to do art. But no, it's possible. Engineers can be artists and artists can be engineers. I think this probably actually goes with the superiority complex thing. I think engineers might tear other engineers down because they're like, oh no, you're an engineer. That means you can't be creative. Because if you are, then you're more than me. So get back down here with me. And I've also heard that argument where it's like, no, actually engineers are very creative. They can be creative in the field if they want to. Like programmers, they're so creative, right? They get to make their own projects and there's a lot of creativity within those projects. I've heard that argument. I've programmed. I don't really get it, if we're being honest, but I believe them. I believe that there are programmers out there that like to make games and make art with code, but that's not me. But that being said, yes, this can exist. Engineers can be creative, and creative people can be engineers. It's weird that these things have been split into two buckets. I think professors should be kept in check of what workload they have acquired. I do not appreciate having a professor who teaches 10 other courses because the classes seem not put together at all, and the content is lackluster and often pointless. I want quality over quantity, obviously. Yeah, I just think this comes down to the school. Like, maybe they can only hire so many professors, so sometimes they overwork certain professors, and more often than not, it's probably too much to handle. So then things fall by the wayside, and in some cases that may be the course that you have with them. So that sucks, and I'm sorry. But that's, I think, why it's so important sometimes to pick the right school. Do the research of like, oh yeah, how hands-on are these classes? Does each professor have like 400 students? Or does each professor have like 20 students where it's a very personal interaction? It's a classroom setting, like in high school and middle school. Depending on what you prefer, you gotta pick your university accordingly. I know as engineers, we have that superiority complex that I mentioned before. So sometimes we're lured into picking the most prestigious university. But if you're not going to get much out of it, right? You're going to get these professors teaching like 17 different courses. They're not going to pay attention to you. Then is it worth it? Is the prestige enough to maybe sacrifice the engineering education you're going to get? So yes, while it's easy to look at the professor and be like, hey, hold them accountable, I think there's so much that's out of their hands. I think they're probably doing the best they can. Some are not. Don't get me wrong, I'm not giving a pass to every professor. Some do just suck, but I think some are just dealt a bad hand. That classes are challenging, but with time are all doable, even for average folk. Ooh, now this is an unpopular opinion, but I agree with it. I think engineering is doable if you were given as much time as you need. And that's why I think sometimes engineers should be knocked down a peg, because it's not really impressive what they do, they just learn that way. Like if you gave someone enough time, I think they could be at your level too. I think engineers get the credit because they're able to do it in the school system. Like I was on the quarter system, so I was able to do these classes in 10 weeks. A lot of people aren't able to do these classes in 10 weeks. It's simply too fast paced for you to keep up, and then you fall out. But that doesn't mean the people that fell out are unable to be engineers. They're just unable to be engineers through this system. There's probably a different system that works, and they probably end up to be as good, if not like a better engineer than someone that succeeded in this system. It's just that school isn't a one size fits all. I know that we all go to school, so you might be led to believe that, oh no, if it doesn't work here for me, then it'll never work. But no, school is just one way to be an engineer. It's the most popular way and the most sought after, most successful way, right? Like it has the best proof of concept. Basically, all our engineers come from school, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible to be one if you didn't go to school. You can still be an engineer without a degree. I don't think anyone's gonna hire you, but that's a whole different story. But no, I think an average person, yes, if you were given enough time, I think they could be an engineer. I think the way it's set up in school is just so shitty that not many people do. Labs are dumb as fuck and a complete waste of time. Yes and no, I think. I think what's missing here is maybe an asterisk, which is that labs have the potential to be useful, but a lot of the time they are dumb and a waste of time. I think they can be so interesting and enriching, but again, because of the school system, I don't think they are most times. It's the time restriction, right? These labs take up, a certain amount of the week, and then your effort towards them takes up a certain amount of week. You're dealing with a finite amount of time here. It kind of goes into the take we just talked about, where if this was all you were doing, right? The labs were all you had to do, then you could invest more in them, and the labs could invest more back into you. And then it would be, fun, useful, enriching. But a lot of times with the school system, they're very suffocated and not given the room to breathe and actually be as good as they could be. Because right now in their current capacity, engineers know this, labs are just you fudging together some numbers for some bullshit percent error so that you can get a participation credit so you can move on to some class that you actually care about. Also, labs are kind of annoying because they're an accessory to a whole class. Like you have this class that has midterms and finals, but then you also have this lab portion of it. So just inherently, it seems like not a priority because it's just an add-on. It's not the whole thing. So yes, I think labs are dumb and a complete waste of time in their current capacity. But if they were reformed in some way, like if they were a whole class of their own, I think they would actually be very valuable and people would look forward to them. Like if you had one class that was just a lab, that'd probably be really fun for engineers because you could invest everything into it. But right now it just seems like, oh yeah, I have to do my class and also a lab. It's like a supplemental thing, but it's not the whole thing. This is a dumb way to think about it, but yeah, it's hard to invest in a lab because it's essentially the side piece to your main course that you're doing. Schools bragging about how students spend sleepless nights doing engineering is not something to brag about. I felt like I'm on the cusp of a complete mental breakdown for the last year. Yes, I couldn't agree more, and I talk all about this in this video right here. Basically, my take is like, oh, just because something feels bad doesn't mean it's worth it. Things can be worth it and not feel like the bane of your existence. I know, hot take, huh? Like the worse a medicine tastes, we think it's more effective for some reason. And I think engineering professors have this same idea. They're like, oh yeah, if engineering feels this bad, it means it's good. It's good for you. You should feel like shit. But just remember, it's for your own good. But I'm saying no, it doesn't have to feel bad. Engineering can feel like Vicks Vapor Rub right on the upper lip, right under your nose. It can feel good and help you. Engineers aren't smart, just very persistent, very detail-oriented and obsessive about their designs, exhaustive with their testing. Almost anyone, more than 90%, could get an engineering degree. They just don't want it enough. The weed out classes test your mental endurance and drive, not your ability to absorb it or apply information. Math is more creative than most forms of art. See, this is like a combination of some of the previous takes we just looked at. A real smorgasbord of unpopular engineering opinions, if you will. So yeah, their first part, engineers aren't smart, they're just persistent. Yes and no, right? Like there has to be some base level intelligence to at least approach this thing. I know there's a nice world out there where, everyone can do this, but I think there are some people that just don't have it in them, not because of a lack of intelligence, but just because they're not really wired in an engineering way. They may be very intelligent when it comes to biology and the medical field, but with engineering, I think there are some people that are like, oh no, not that. And that's not just engineering. Like I said, the same person that could be an engineer maybe can't succeed in the medical field. I think I probably fit into that category. They say almost anyone could get an engineering degree, they just don't want it enough. I think there's only so much grit you can put into the thing. Again, as much as I would like to say anyone can get the degree, I don't think anyone can just will themselves into it. But you're right, yes, they just don't want it enough. I think sometimes we read that statement as like, oh yeah, they're just not trying hard enough. But I think we could also interpret that as, oh, they don't want it enough just inherently. Like, they don't want to be an engineer. So, like, it's hard to pursue that thing. Like, the level of indifference could be so high that it's like, yeah, I just literally don't want it. And the weed out classes, they test your mental endurance and drive, not your ability to absorb or apply information. I think a lot of the weed out classes typically have to do with, again, I'm going to blame the schools here. I think it has to do with the way the class is set up and maybe the professors' teaching methods. It's funny because if you look at a weed out class in one school, it may not be the same weed out class as a different school. So then you're like, wait, how's that possible, right? It's the same class, same material, right? Because yeah, it's the system in which the class is taught. It may not be the actual class. Like I remember in college, I took some calculus classes. I took what was called Math 21B. And I remember the first time I took it, yeah, I failed. I failed Math 21B, my second calculus class in college. And then I took it with a different professor the next quarter. And I don't know what it was. Everything was clicking so much more. And I was scoring super high on all the tests. I think I got an A on every midterm and final. But same class, right? 21B, Math 21B. Of course, your immediate argument here could be like, oh, you just got a really easy professor, very lax professor. But no, I genuinely felt like I was understanding the material. It wasn't one of those situations where you realize, oh, this class is being graded very easily, but I'm not learning anything. That was not what my math experience was like. That was my physics experience. Yeah, no, I genuinely don't think I know any physics. I've learned more about physics after I've graduated college, just from like reading physics books, than I learned in college. And then the last sentence, math is more creative than most forms of art. All right. We found the engineer in the bunch. Yeah, that's a bold take. I think math is very creative. Like once you really get into the weeds with math, you can see that, oh, it is very beautiful, but it's not beautiful in the same way that other art is. I think a lot of art, when we say that word, is visually appealing. I think math has a lot of theoretical beauty that once you read up on it and you understand all these patterns and the way that the math world works, then you can appreciate it. But to the layman, to the everyday person, yeah, it's kind of hard to appreciate math. So yeah, very unpopular opinions, and I would like to hear your unpopular engineering opinions. So leave them down in the comments below. Make sure you like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Instagram. And I will see you in the next one.